what's the subject of her speech? Like the thing she's talking about. One more time?
The Equal Rights Amendment.
Yeah, the amendment, right? And what's her position on the amendment?
Oh, she supports the amendment.
She supports the amendment, yes. How is that similar to what you... We were reading a speech by Shirley Chisholm that she gave in 1970 on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives on the Equal Rights Amendment. So they're debating whether or not this is a good amendment, and she's giving this whole speech to talk about why other people should support the amendment. So that information helps us understand why she's giving the speech, maybe, right? I try to pick texts that they wouldn't read otherwise. Not that I don't think more traditional texts aren't awesome. Like, I think they are, but they will get them somewhere else. Someone has to give them other voices in order for them to empathize with other types of people. So equal rights. We typically think of what kinds of people?
Black people.
Or,
Black people?
yeah,
Or
minorities.
okay, or
Asian people. Minorities. You could just go with minorities.
But when you read something that you see yourself in, it's exciting because it means that number one, your instructor thinks that experience is valuable because they decided to include it. But what is she suggesting here? She's saying we have this law that like makes sure women aren't overworked, but it's kind of also unfair to
not do it to men too.
Yeah, she's saying like an amendment on equal rights is not going to be good for just women, right?
It's going to be good.
It's going to be beneficial for more, right? Because who is she talking to?
The House of Representatives
And majority
men.
Yeah, so like she knows her audience, right? We had a really good conversation about like the status of women's rights today and what our legislature looks like demographic-wise and why that might be. They came to the consensus that people have biases. We all have them, but what's crucial is that you recognize when you have them. There are a number of historical oppressions that still have an influence on why students perform the way they perform today, and there's nothing innate about those students in particular. That's the consensus we have about those things, and because of that, we just operate with that in mind all the time.
I mean, when we look at student achievement data, like this baseline data that all educators in all states look at, despite all of the interventions of the last 20 years and all of the programs and the software and the initiatives, we still have a significant and disturbing discipline gap. We still have an academic and achievement gap, a testing gap. We have all of these data points that are still not getting much better and that in some cases are increasing in bad ways. And so we have to do something different.
Throughout the history of the United States, we've been haunted by the specters of racism and prejudice. But fortunately, there have always been educators and citizens who've struggled against these forces of racism and prejudice to try to create a more perfect union in our society and a more perfect union in our schools. So I started my career as a high school history teacher. And now, some 20 years later, I run a lab at MIT called the Teaching Systems Lab, where we aspire to design, implement, and research the future of teacher learning. We're trying to help teachers do their work better. And a big part of that for me is really listening to and learning from some of our most experienced educators about how they address the inequities that they see in their schools. What exactly are teachers doing in the classrooms where all students thrive? But especially our most marginalized, our most vulnerable students are thriving. For me, the enduring question is if I sat in the classroom of an educator who was really doing that work well, what exactly would it look like? What would be the practices that I would see in that classroom that I might not see in other places? We spent time with educators all around the country to observe the things that they do to make school more equitable for all students. In watching their journeys, we discovered small steps that all teachers can begin to take in their own classrooms.
McCormick is located in Dorchester, which is the most diverse, most populated neighborhood in the city of Boston. There are challenges that are really specific to being a young person of color in the city of Boston that make the day-to-day of school really hard for some kids. And those are the kids in my classroom, right? I grew up in rural West Virginia in a majority white community. So my experience growing up was of always being the extreme racial minority. For kids to sort of believe that like I'm in this with them or that we're doing this work together, like they have to know who I am and where I come from. We're looking at my identity tree, and the way I explain it to kids is that your roots are kind of where you come from. This is my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather, right? West Virginia is where I was born. The trunk of your tree is sort of like the formative experiences you've had along the way. These are a couple pictures of me in school that let me talk about race and my experiences with race. Then after I do mine, I have kids create their own. They're also gonna do the work of bringing their identities into the room, and so I kind of feel like I have to start with mine. If I want them to be their full selves, they have to see my full self. My story is a lot about race, and a lot about immigration, and a lot about equity. By sharing it with them early, it also lets me put out there early that part of the reason why I'm a teacher is because the negative experiences I had around race growing up made me really want to do the work of making sure kids didn't have those kinds of experiences. I really believe that like at the core of it, all learning is about relationships. The stronger the relationship is, the better the learning is gonna be.
As we heard from Nima, the teachers who are most effective in their equity work, they tend to have done some of their own identity work and reflection. It's an ongoing practice that allows teachers to see themselves more clearly, and with that understanding, they see their students more clearly too. And it's from that place that more authentic relationships can form, and relationships are at the core of learning.
I just want you to send me an email answering these 4 main questions. It's a reflection on this year so far. So how are you doing? What's been going well so far this year? What hasn't been going well? And then how can I, as a teacher, or how can we as a school or a community support you? You can talk about school specifically. You can talk about stuff outside of school if that's really where you need support. Originally, I got into teaching because I was tired of kids being shot down from the beginning. I was tired of kids being told that they wouldn't do anything or told X, Y, and Z, when in reality, those kids just need more support. They need more love, they need more attention, they need more access to quality materials. They just need more opportunity. I've noticed how important it is to know yourself in order to teach others. If I don't know myself, then I'm not gonna be able to present my kind of authentic self to my students, and students catch on to that 100% quick. Okay. What you're gonna do is pick one of those overarching themes that we talked about and see if you can find its impact on Indianapolis itself. I need your topic, I need your research question, and I need that idea of an end product that you might have in mind. I'll be walking around to have a conversation with you guys about it if you have any questions. Sound good? Any questions right now?
I'm interested in this red line.
Cool. Sweet.
Because, like, you know how some neighborhoods have higher crime rates and violence. So I'm trying to see if, like, the red line could be reasons for this.
Beautiful. If you click this, we can go over here to the left. Bring it back now, y'all. I'm just kidding. Click that. And as you look at this, when you look at the different neighborhoods, think of that research question that you want to dive into. As I've gone on the past year, the one-on-one is something that I've tried to incorporate more so. It gives you time to have those conversations that a student will feel more comfortable to approach you. At the end of the day, you're 2 people trying to connect.
When you have that relationship with your teacher, when you can just talk to them or come to them outside of the class, you can get more help with your studies. You can just talk to your teachers and say, hey, can I get help with this? I kind of don't understand this. Can you go over this with me? I enjoy coming to school now. I look forward to it. Like I have someone to talk to at least, even if I didn't have friends.
If you're in 9th or 10th grade and you are not a proficient reader, you have been told many, many, many times, possibly every day of your educational life, what you're not good at. They're pretty good, by the way. 9th and 10th graders are great at listing their deficits to you. I don't want to give them any more ammunition in that effort. My dad used to say, if you ever want something out of a child, accuse them of it first. And I live my whole teaching career this way. So as soon as I see sort of a nugget of brilliance in them, they get accused of it a lot. And it's reiterated a lot. The minute you say, what's that student's deficit, I immediately think of numbers and data. But that has nothing to do with him as a human being or what he brings to my classroom, the value that he bestows on any group that he's a part of. Put your name on it. Put your name on top of that.
What are adjectives again?
You know, like descriptive words like kind, friendly, beautiful. Isabella, what's your favorite?
I like how you are so kind to your friends and think deeply about how to be happy.
That's you.
That's cute. I like this. This is cool.
Are you okay?
You can. I like your personality because you can always turn any situation around.
I think our teachers do a phenomenal job at seeing all of us for what we are and what we want to be. So for me specifically, it's really helped to have those close connections with my teachers because I'm not afraid to talk to them anymore. And if I'm having trouble understanding someone's ideology or someone's having trouble understanding mine, it's a little bit easier. I think the biggest thing to open someone up to the conversation is going to be to create a personal relationship with them.
How you want to frame your own thoughts in your head have a lot to do with how much you get out of a student or how a student feels about you. So I can't control a lot of things, but what I can control is what I'm thinking about a student. I know that student's a great leader, or I know that student's a great listener. Like I know that he's going to listen to me, and I know that she's going to be able to draw, and I know that he's going to be able to write all the text out. There's no student in my class that's not accused of something really exceptional. And it's always really sad when one of them will say, no one's ever told me that, or, you know, and you're like, I just want you to hear every single day that you do these amazing things and bring all this value to the space that you're in. Anyway, it's the fun part of my job.
One thing you can see with really great teachers is they can be a little bit subversive. They have this way of flipping the expectations that people have of schools. So you watch Angela teach and you realize that she's not gonna go and try to figure out what's broken in kids and fix it. She's gonna figure out what's amazing in kids and try to build that up.
If you're taking like a group shot, right? You got a bunch of different people, they're in different rows. Are you gonna pick a low aperture or a high aperture?
High.
Why?
Because you want everyone to want the background blurred out.
Yeah. You want all the people in focus. Very good. Okay, mini lesson, we got it. I had a moment with a student who walked out of a class yesterday. He was being redirected, and what I discovered is that he didn't like how he was being redirected, and so that was a valuable piece of information that we will use moving forward in terms of trying to get him where he needs to be and doing what he needs to do. And because of some of the other behaviors that he's been showing that are more attention-seeking, I'm guessing he just needs more attention. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gathering clues as to how to, you know, work and get at what you need. So I realized as well that, lately with this student, usually when I talk with him, it's like, oh, I need your headphones out, or, hey, could you sit down right there for me? My plan is to use that information is to go forward and intentionally like have more touch points with him. Just saying, okay, I've talked to him a few times a day and increasing the amount of positive interactions I have with them. And if I'm able to just have more touch points where it's like, you're doing a good job. How's it going? I like that jacket. It might change something for him. So we'll see how it works. I think that the most powerful thing that brings me back to the equity mindset is thinking about trauma specifically. Instead of asking, you know, what's wrong with this kid? It's like, what happened to this kid? And so keeping that question in the back of my mind for every single student brings me back to everybody needs something different. And it's my job to figure out what that is. I look for trauma more now than I had ever before. I realize now more that behaviors don't just come from nowhere. I would say every kid wants to be a good student.
Like Ronnie, great teachers look for clues. They figure out, I'm not gonna give every kid the exact same thing. I'm gonna try to figure out what each individual kid needs and give them that. In particular, when we design for the kids at the margin, we end up creating supports and resources that end up helping out lots of kids who also benefit from those supports.
You're gonna write down some of the stuff we started talking about yesterday. She's saying that some of our laws at the time were really unclear and inconsistent. I think any student benefits from like an organic back and forth with their instructor. And I think some of our students, they weren't afforded the opportunity to think something out. Like, it's cool if we just sit here and like think about it. Like, you don't have to spit it out. And if you don't spit it out immediately, it doesn't mean anything about like your ability to make connections. So I think that is the biggest thing. It gives them the opportunity to slow down. Students who the system is really built for get the time to do that. I think what's most important is that students are all exposed to the same thing. It's like getting to experience that rigor and also knowing that like you are also worthy enough to take this class. So then she says that we have amendments that suggest that women should be equal, but in practice we have other laws that contradict it.
The amendment is necessary to clarify different things that are not clear in our legal system.
Yeah, basically. That's one claim. That's just one, but there are more. Can you find the other ones?
Is there anything or something you're interested in presenting?
How's it going, man?
Good. Right now, I don't have a question.
That's fine.
I'm just working on Indianapolis, like black violence and stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm working more towards violence and racial stuff.
Okay.
That's what I'm
So like race relations in a sense? Or
Mhm.
okay.
Somewhere in, I don't know, I gotta figure out my head.
No, that's fine.
But
So
I
whatever
realize-
you're thinking about, use that, like you have it right here, right?
Mhm.
Mind map. So just start that mind map and start thinking about all the random things that you might want to look into. And then we can use that as a starting point. And then we can start a conversation there. Cool.
Okay.
Cool. A question will come out of that. Do you have an idea for end product yet that you might want to create?
Poetry.
Okay, beautiful. Works for me.
Poetry and maybe a drawing.
Okay, you can do both. A key thing for me is allowing students to define what success looks like within my own project, right? We need sources. They need to be credible. You need to get all this information. But when it comes down to it, allowing them to define how they present that in a way that represents who they are is important to me. And it's important to the students as well to give them that voice within the classroom. What's up?
I'm not really sure.
Cool. Hey, that's why I'm here. Why'd you pick violence?
Something that's interesting to me.
Okay.
We have a lot of it in Indianapolis.
Okay. You just said we have a lot of violence in Indiana. Where does that violence stem from? Can I track this violence in this specific neighborhood or this specific area back to the policy that we've talked about? So you could try to do something like that. I see you already have a book, right? Okay, cool. Why that?
I'm good at writing.
Okay. But what I want out of that end product is something that you've wanted to try to work on, something you want to improve on. So I want you to try to get creative and try something new.
Okay.
Kids have different interests and they have different minds and they have different things that pull them forward. So one of the things that we see in Jake's classroom is that he's creating different access points for students to get into the substance of the material in the classroom. And he's also creating different opportunities for students to express what it is they've learned.
Does anybody know what Wall Street is? Have you ever heard the phrase, Wall Street before? It's okay if you haven't. Wall Street is a place in New York City. It's actually a street called Wall Street, but Wall Street is kind of seen as like the heart of American business. And this is called Black Wall Street. What else do you see? Black Wall Street is actually the idea of black people saying, okay, fine, segregation exists. We're gonna find ways to build our own wealth. And so today we're actually gonna learn about the history of Black Wall Street, which was a real place. It was the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Black Wall Street existed for about 70 years. And it had this kind of tough experience of like, it rose, it then got destroyed, and then they had to rebuild. And so what we're gonna do for the first 20 minutes of class is you're gonna get a chance to become an expert on the history of Black Wall Street. I'm gonna ask you to look at least one news article and one news video so you can get some good background from them. And then you can choose, do you wanna read the comic book, do you wanna listen to the song, or do you wanna look at the poetry? Once we're done researching, you're gonna be jumping into partners with a partner of your choice and being able to design a lesson with them. Part of what I'm trying to do in this unit is teach kids stories of Black history that they haven't learned before, balance stories that are painful with stories that are also really powerful, and show kids people thriving, people pushing back, people resisting and succeeding, even in difficult contexts. There are pictures and yeah, I mean, like it shows you like the before and the after, right? What did we learn yesterday about healthcare? Was healthcare equal for Black and white people during segregation?
Because white nurses couldn't even treat Black
patients, yeah, exactly, right. So I would say probably that there was a lot of unequal treatment even when they went to the hospital. I think lots of people don't know the history. And then I do think there is a systemic part of it. I think that the narratives that we teach around race in America aren't about resistance a lot of the time. I think we often try to gloss over the hard stuff. What I felt like in both classes, kids were both able to see like, wow, this is really deep history. Like, wow, this existed and it was so powerful and it's so meaningful. And also to think about like, yeah, why haven't we learned it before?
I feel like we should like learn. We should have learned this because like in just elementary school in general, like third grade, you learn about the Boston Tea Party. You learn about like white people fighting for like their independence. But like, what about Black people? Like, did they ever fight for their independence or like it was given to them? Like, obviously it wasn't given to them. So we learned about like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, but like, that was like the ending. Like, what about the beginning?
That's right, and this is the beginning. So if I'm not talking about race and the way that race is affecting them and affecting their families, then I'm just like, I'm being blind to the very real issues that we're all struggling with. And that just doesn't feel right as a teacher. Like, my job is to help kids make sense of what's happening in the world, not to pretend that what's happening in the world isn't happening.
Teachers confronting prejudice talk about race and difference in school. They're trying to form a shared community in their schools and their classrooms, and they honor our shared humanity, but they know that race and differences affect their students' lives every single day, and they aren't afraid to talk about that reality with their students.
One of the support beams is a 2x4. And then we have another 2x4 right here.
The students at Latitude are working on building tiny homes for students who are homeless in Oakland.
Everybody does a little bit of everything. You build a floor, build the scaffolding for it, you build a roof, and you have to cut the pieces of wood. Everybody's involved in everything, at least once.
That closet is right
bathroom
there.
will be
Right
outside.
there, and we're gonna make a little like folding table here. You grab more wood and put it to here, and a piano hinge to set up so it could fold up and down.
It resonates with a lot of students because in Oakland and in the Bay Area, there's a huge crisis of homelessness in the city, and they see it everywhere. So when they are working on something to address some of the issues that are happening in a bigger lens, like that makes them feel part of the, again, it's just like curating your community, like making sure your community is impacted by the work that you do in school and you're putting it out there.
Our physics teacher, Regina, is working with our students in collaboration with different volunteers from the community. It was really important to Regina that they weren't just like building something random for the sake of just learning the physics concepts, right? Like they are, in fact, sort of rooting and connecting each of the labs that they're doing in physics to the concepts that they're using to build this house. But it's not just an abstract exercise. It's ultimately going to be live within an actual community and be utilized by someone. In order for students to really reach their fullest potential, they need to unpack their own sense of identity and have a sense of what drives them, what motivates them. As a school, we often talk to kids about like, what's the fire in your belly? What is it that motivates you, right? And oftentimes that goes back to their roots. That's another way we really see equity playing into our practices, is because we don't think that skills should just be taught completely in isolation from everything else.
And then they have like the bathrooms will be outside
In the kitchen too.
And the kitchen, so there's no like fires or anything.
Yeah.
The tiny home project has been like all students are like, the majority of students like, that's what they want to talk about, because they feel like that is part of like their high school experience. So I know that doing this work is impacting someone that feels like me or is in a worse position than me. So they are always kind of reflecting on those pieces. Yeah.
It's not easy building a house, but it's definitely gonna be easy to change someone's life with that house.
What we see happening in Oakland is that teachers, school leaders, they're talking real talk about the challenges in their community. And they're saying, we're gonna learn the standards in the curriculum, but we're gonna learn it in a way that lets you also explore these real challenges that you see every day in your neighborhood. And even better, we're gonna give you some tools and some pathways of trying to bring some solutions to those problems.
Snippet that Khalid read to us. I need you to go look at it now before we even start, is because it's important.
When I meet my students in the beginning of the school year, one of the first things I tell them is that like, I need them to bring their whole selves with them. And I pretty specifically define background knowledge as like every single lived experience you've had everywhere else, or watched, or read about. Many of my kids have been in other countries. They might speak different languages. My students know so many things about their world and their lived experiences that I have no idea about. And by explicitly giving my students permission to include all the things that they know in our classroom conversations, that makes my classroom conversations richer. So you guys read through the tests, one of which you took as 5th graders, and then you asked some questions using a Google form. So using like this lens, and you guys are gonna draft your own Google form. Are these passages relevant? I had the students evaluate the cultural relevance of MCAS because we spend so much time as planners in schools thinking about whether or not we're being culturally relevant, and who better to pose that question than the kids themselves who are living through those daily testing experiences. I had checked in with Angel and Christelle a little bit because they had started to apply their data from their analysis to see what conclusions that meant that they could draw about DESE. You guys want to share some of that?
None of their excerpts meet our expectations of cultural needs.
0% of the stories included person of color, 1%.
I asked them to look through the texts to see if they identified or could connect with the characters in the text. And that doesn't mean that they have to be people of color or not people of color, or they have to be boys or they have to be girls. None of that matters. It's just like, do they see themselves in any way in that character? Because that's like a connection point. Is it interesting? Does it have information that they care about? Is it joyful? Is it engaging? Because those are the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves as teachers before we present a text to our students. It's also questions that we ask ourselves as readers before we select a text.
Education should certainly take us to other places, but there should also be opportunities to see ourselves in the curriculum. Not just in the classes that we teach, and the books we read, and the topics that we cover, but in the tests and assessments that students take. What's so powerful about what's happening in Miss Leiter's classroom is she's having her students look at the tests that the state creates for their school and says, how much do you see yourselves in this part of the curriculum?
Is this passage culturally relevant? Did it meet your criteria? Does it meet enough of the criteria to be considered culturally relevant? No. So some of the discovery that the students did when we were unpacking the MCAS was encountering characters who maybe didn't look like them or sound like them. They uncovered that they are not reflected in the test, and I think that was disappointing for them.
It's just like not fair. Like they need to like make the test and the MCAS like so much more fair. Just because we're colored or just because we look like this or look like that, we deserve as much treatment that they have.
How do we go about changing that message?
We could like prove them wrong. Like we could prove them wrong. Like we are capable of like probably doing so much more things. They just have to give us a chance.
I hope that my students know that I trust them to do big thinking. And I know that when we take risks and ask big questions, like that is a force for change.
Unless we're intentional about talking about racial equity, and then the intersectional conversations off of that around poverty and other isms out there, then we're not going to get at the root cause of why things look the way they do in all of our systems, and specifically our education system. We have kind of the original sin in this country that we haven't really faced up to and quite often don't talk about, but plays itself out every day in the numbers that we see. Who makes it, who doesn't. Quite often students, and depending on the age, they'll say things like, oh, this place is racist, or, and then you have to try to start unpacking with the students what they mean by that. And the sad part is maybe it's just one experience, or maybe it's an experience they feel every day, but they're holding on to that, and that's how they feel about their building. So if the school's not being responsive, but also reflective and adding in kind of student voice, family voice into how they do their business, then in some ways they're purposely blind to how the kids feel. You're talking about hundreds of years of oppression that we're trying to deal with. But I think we're on a path. If we have any chance, then our adults in our buildings need to be aware, comfortable talking about racial equity, and then be able to embed that into some of their practices. I think that would give us more hope as a country and hopefully building a more just society.
If you are an educator, you have to have a passion to create change at a bigger lens.
We have young people in front of us every day for 180 days a year. We are the space where change can really happen.
We're in the human business. I mean, we are teaching human beings, right? The most marginalized students that we have need the most relationships.
That's really what teaching is. The relentless pursuit of knowledge and constantly reflecting on everything that happened today and how I could have done it better.
If a flower's dying, you don't fix the flower, you fix the environment. You give it more water, better soil, etc. And I think the same thing applies to kids. Believing that every kid has something amazing to offer.
We call our challenge a someday Monday problem. These are big, challenging issues that we want to try to resolve someday, but we've got to figure out what is it that we can do on Monday to begin taking one step to make progress towards these challenges. These are big societal-wide issues that we're confronting here. Racism, prejudice, systemic inequalities. You and your colleagues are not going to fix these things by next month. But every day we can choose something to do about these issues. We hope that the teachers in this film have inspired you to choose one thing that you can do today to help our schools be something different for students.